This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I am super excited. This is a very special guest. I've been chasing AJ around because he's the busiest man on earth. He's the founder and CEO of QuotaPath, limited partner at Stage 2 Capital, host of the Top Line podcast, serial entrepreneur, commercial pilot, dad, etc., etc., etc. AJ, how are you, my friend?
Etc., etc. There's a lot of etceteras there. Jay, you and I had dinner a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about our day-to-day. There was a bunch of CEOs, and we're like, what do CEOs do? And I find it interesting because there is a lot that is going on in our lives. I say our lives, my wife and I with our 3 kids. But I don't know, I feel like I have more time and energy these days than I've ever had. So I'll take that for right now. And then tomorrow it's all going to fall apart. It's going to be a mess.
But I think, and we'll get to this, but I think it's because you've spent some time reflecting and figuring out how to recharge your batteries. And I think that's like a big part of being able to do all this stuff. You bang yourself into a wall long enough to not take care of yourself. It catches up with you, but it sounds like you've got a good
think we'll talk a little bit about that during this episode.
I think so. All right. I did not know this until before the show. We talked a little bit, but where did you grow up? And do you think that had any impact on you being an entrepreneur?
Well, that's funny you mentioned that because you were so excited to talk to an Eagles fan on
So
this
excited.
call.
I was so pumped.
And then it turns out I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, 6-time Super Bowl champion.
Oh, you had to do it, didn't you?
Sorry, I apologize for that. But to answer your question, 100% had a huge impact on me personally from an entrepreneur. And there's 2 really big things. Jay, you've had this conversation with many founders and entrepreneurs, and just like many founders and entrepreneurs, they typically learn from one of their parents. And in this case, my dad was huge influence on 2 fronts. One, growing up, he was a pilot. So my commercial pilotism stems from family. My dad was a pilot. My mom was actually a flight attendant, both for US Air. Yes, that's how they met originally. But growing up in the 90s in Pittsburgh, where US Air was based, was actually kind of a scary time. My dad's really good friend, unfortunately, perished in an accident, a plane accident in 1994. A US airplane crashed in Pittsburgh. And that had a huge influence on him because he wasn't sure if he was going to have a stable job. Their airlines, American Airlines, are not what they were today. There were 6 crashes in a row for US Air. And so he started a side gig. He actually started a video production company when I was 4 or 5 years old. And he did a lot of training videos, a lot of local commercials to start. And I actually would just happen to be a cute little kid. I had strawberry blonde hair, and they're like, why don't you just put myself in front of the camera? And so I did that when I was 4 or 5. And that started to evolve in 2 fronts. One, seeing my dad having this side gig and being an entrepreneur himself. But the other was actually acting itself. So I did a lot of stage when I was a kid. Yeah, Pittsburgh Public Theater. I performed. So for the entire year of 8th grade, I had to get a tutor, and I was Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream. If we shadows have offended, think but this and all is mended. Won't do the whole monologue, but I did 8 shows a week for, it was like 4 or 5 months. And it was a pretty long time. Got paid professionally, had to join the union, and I loved it. I loved every bit of it. So that was really where I got my entrepreneurial genes from in the very, very early days in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I can feel it a little bit when I talk to you, and when we talk one-on-one, and then I see you talk in front of a group, or maybe on the show where we both know you got to turn it on a little bit.
It's always on, Jay. It's always on.
I can feel you have some practice with that. One thing I want to ask you, the crash thing is crazy. And the head instructor at Doylestown, which I'm not sure if you knew or not, but died in an accident a few years ago. And that's where I was flying out of. And it was very scary and impactful. What does your wife think about you flying so much? Does she, stay up at night when you fly? Does she fly with you guys and let you fly the kids around? What's kind of the entrepreneurial founder life as a pilot with 3 kids?
Well, you're picking up on a pretty dangerous topic here because I can talk about aviation all
I know we won't, but
long.
we won't. I just
And
want to know how does she feel about it?
so when we first started dating, I was already flying, and we started dating in high school. So I've been flying since I was 14 years old,
That's right.
and it's always been in my blood and something that I've communicated with her that I at some point am going to fly more. I think flying, if you don't know, takes a lot of money. It takes time, money, and passion. And I always had the passion, but having the funds to do so was a little bit of a challenging. So she knew that to be the case. I started my career in sales, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I actually started my first company, Trend Kite, because I wanted to own an airplane and I didn't know how else to do that. And I was like, I'm going to go do it. And I'd only had my private license and barely had just gotten it. I ran out of money in my 20s to continue on. So my late 20s, I picked it back up and have since completed my instrument rating and my commercial license, as we talked about. But to answer your question, she's been very positive. I think the thing that's very different, I don't say different from any other pilots because it can happen to anyone. And you mentioned instructors have a lot of hours. And unfortunately, there's been some people even recently in general aviation that have perished that are the director of the Air Safety Institute, unfortunately, passed away over the winter. So it's not for the faint of heart, but the thing that you can think about is that there's redundancy in airplanes and there's a lot of opportunities to catch failures along the way. I mean, even my plane has two engines and has two batteries and two alternators. And so there's two of everything along the way to help. But at the end, it's usually on the pilot, and pilot error is the cause of 99% of all accidents that are up there. And it
Mhm.
can be as simple as shouldn't have gone flying in that weather system or should have waited. This didn't feel right. So a lot of the chain reaction that can cause these failures is well studied, but just not understood by all pilots, unfortunately.
Yeah, the 99% being pilot error is definitely like a thing you learn as you're getting your license that it's rarely just like the airplane falling apart. It's usually
Yep.
you doing something that's not right. I'm gonna, one last question, kind of aviation related. And I don't know if I haven't seen every episode of Value Props, but just a very cool show. And like, I love, your thoughts and how you put that together. But how's a founder like a pilot? I mean, what are kind of some of the common things, I mean, how do you see the two things together? Does it make sense? Because you see a lot of pilots that are CEOs and founders. Like, I don't know if it's like you said, maybe it's the money thing, maybe it's just like the freedom thing. I don't know what it is, but like, how are those two things connected so often?
I mean, I think we both know, Jay, like there's a lot you could on the 30,000 foot view, if we're talking about flying, there's a lot on the surface that's like has overlap between these two. And so if you think about it, flying, it's not about flying the airplane. And in fact, my daughters who are 11 and twins that are 9 fly my airplane. And I have friends that go up and fly my airplane. But it's everything else around the flying of the airplane that actually matters. You have the systems, you have the weather, you have air traffic control, you have navigation as a piece of this. And so keeping all of these things in balance and constantly monitoring them is just like running a business where you have different parts of the business. You have marketing, you have product, you have engineering, you have customer success, you have sales, and making sure that there is a balance between those two and you're constantly doing your scan. I think that's kind of the same thing. We all have our dashboard and in our world in the cockpit, there's a full suite of avionics where we're constantly doing that scan. That same thing happens. Now that's one side of it. The other side of it is just from a freedom standpoint, and
Hmm.
flying is definitely a hobby where it allows me to clear my mind. I'm a runner as well, so I run and can clear my mind. But on a Friday afternoon, you might find me on a nice day up in the clouds. So that's the other side of it as well. I do think that my parents who live in the Outer Banks, they drive up now and they still work in Philadelphia. We fly down. It's an hour and 15-minute flight with the girls in the back. That ability to travel has been really helpful. I've done trips to Boston for events and conferences. I fly usually Austin to Philadelphia once a year. I have a whole other story where I got stuck in Tunica, Mississippi with a colleague of mine, my director of brand, and because an alternator wouldn't come back on, so we didn't fly. We had to drive to Memphis and then fly to Atlanta. And so sometimes it's a little bit challenging, but at the same time, there's always something to learn and grow from. And that's what it's really all about being a founder CEO is learning and growing every day too.
All right, I said that was my last one, but I lied. There's one more. What is your six pack
Oh,
doing a
for
business?
TikTok, for everyone that doesn't know, is these 6 instruments that are key to flying, and I have a Garmin 500 TXI, so it's a touch screen as there, and then a GTN 750 as my XI as my navigator also. It's all integrated. The coolest thing I had for a while is I had a Garmin watch that was connected to my phone, and my phone was connected to my avionics, and so I would literally change the direction of my plane with my watch from time, which is so James Bond, but so ridiculous and not
Right.
useful in any practical way, but
Just
cool
cool.
for people out there to see, like, you're cha that's so stupid, but
Yeah.
it was fun.
I mean, sometimes it's just about doing cool stuff, you know? All right. So, what was the first business you started?
The first business I started was a company in college called controlthebuzz.com. So I'll paint a picture here for you. This is 2005, 2006. And there was a Australian entrepreneur who created a company called Million Dollar Homepage. And he made all the news. It went viral. And that founder made this site where you could go on the site and for $1 buy a pixel on the screen, and he would keep the website for like 10 years. I actually think it still exists today, Million Dollar Homepage. And that pixel was bought by advertisers that could create links, but you had to buy these $1,000 100 by 100 squares or whatever. And so he
Mhm.
had all of the squares, and in a week he made $1 million. And I was like, what? If it's that easy, there's got to be a play here that I could do. So this is before Twitter. This is 2005. So I thought of this idea where it was instead of like having all these pixels and whatever, it was actually a blank screen, and there was just one text box. And on that text box, you could write anything you wanted to. You could like, Jay is the best founder. He's awesome. Or Jay sucks. He's not awesome. Whatever you wanted to do. And I just had to pay $1 to do it. And so I had $1. And so I'd be controlling the buzz. And I was just like, loved this idea. Then we went so many different ways with it and thought about the idea of like it freezes after 100 for 10 minutes and 1,000 for an hour and so on and so forth. Built the website, got payment processing through Wachovia at the
Oh,
time.
wow. Which is,
Yeah,
are they even still around
again,
anymore? I don't know if they are.
Wells Fargo bought them in
Right.
like
That's right.
2010. But yeah, Wachovia, or First National or whatever it was at the bank. And you could put in your credit card online in 2005. And we built the site, and to promote it, I was at Penn State at the time, and I went around to all of the different buildings in between classes. There's this really well-known guy who's, I don't know if he's still there, the Willard preacher, and he was preaching outside the Willard building, and I like interrupted him, and I was in Shakespearean garb. That's why I had it from all the Shakespeare contests I had done in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
And I did this whole monologue, and then I threw Control the Buzz like pamphlets up in the air and like ran to another one. And I think it got written about in the Collegian as well to do this. So we started it, and the next question you're gonna ask me is about the first customer of Control the
Of course.
Buzz, I assume,
Of
Jay.
course.
So my first customer was my wife. So she controlled the buzz, and it was just, I don't know, even remember what she put, but then my dad controlled the buzz and had back and forth. And I think the total for the site that we made in that month was like $36. So not because, and ultimately monetizing it was our downfall. So I learned a lot of things. Like one was focus, try to do too much with the website. And the
Mhm.
other was monetizing it too early. And I ultimately ran out of time because I went and studied abroad in Italy the next semester, and I shut it down after that. But it was technically my first business.
And then you went into sales after that when you came back?
Yeah, when I came back and graduated from Smeal with a degree in economics, I had a lot of different options. I think to your point earlier, you said you did some research just enough to pass. I think that was my call. That's a great, I'm going to use that line. I had like a 3.2 GPA. So I wasn't like internships were banging down my door, but I did have a couple different options. I had interned at NFL Films this summer before, which was a really great experience and like fit into the production. But I knew I didn't wanna do anything in media, or at least on that side of it. And so I asked an uncle and my father, who were both successful in business, like, what type of discipline should I get into? And they both had the same answer, which was sales. Like, sales, no one wants to be in sales, right? No one wants to be in sales. And so I thought about that, and I was like, well, I don't, just the used car salesman, like, you'll learn everything you need about a business, about revenue, about what drives the top line and the bottom line through
Mhm.
sales. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I interviewed, and the first interview I had was with this company in Meltwater in 2007. And it was a group interview, and it was strange. It felt a little weird. It was a Norwegian company, Swedish Nordic company. And I got the offer and I took it right away. And that took me on a 5.5 year journey in cold call sales through different parts of the country, but also different leadership roles and opportunities.
Such a great intro to business, like you said. Founders who don't have that experience or don't have sales training, myself included in this question, what would you recommend they do later? You've got a business you've been running for a couple of years. You don't have like that super strong sales background. You made some sales. You've got a couple channels. You're doing a couple things, but to elevate yourself, which you kind of came into running a business with, how would you recommend somebody kind of catch up or, maybe get some of those skills that maybe they missed out on before they started running that business?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Jay, and you know this as well as I do, the first few sales, dozen sales, maybe 100 sales even, are founder led. And that as business owners, that like has to come through you no matter what. I think that's something that we all know. Maybe we forget. So your question is like, well, if you have a business that's 10, 12 years old and it's changed and you had a sales leader, you yourself haven't been doing the sales, that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, we all still have to be customer obsessed and
Mhm.
still have to have those connections with our customers and understand them. I myself have 3 to 4 customer conversations a week with our customers. And I think that's still really important. I don't lead our sales team today, but that's first and foremost, are you doing the customer work, and start there. Secondly, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to understand the sales methodology and the process 100%. You carry the bag, so to speak.
Mhm.
Similar to like for myself and my CTO, Eric, I'm not in their shortcut tickets and their Jira tickets and trying to understand all of the work breakdown that needs to happen for those things, but I am there as a support. So I think the other part of it is just making sure you understand it and that you can talk intelligently to anyone on the team about any of their deals or opportunities. So,
Mhm.
one, do you know what opportunities? Do you know what CRM you're using? Do you know how they use the CRM? Do you know what marketing automation tool you all are using? How do leads flow from the marketing automation to that CRM? How does your outbound motion work? How does your SEO work? What tools are you using? Is your content changed? Are you in any communities? Are you on any podcasts? Like, these are just the general questions that you should be asking yourself around that, because it's a big world out there and a lot's changed in the last couple of years. So staying up to date, and I mentioned this before, learning and growing is something that I love about entrepreneurship. And that's true today. So even for sales, yeah, I had a sales background in 2007. I ran large sales teams, 150 people for my previous company, 2012, which we'll get to 2018. But those teams were so radically different than what's needed today to win. And that's the important part of what I think is changed in this journey for entrepreneurs. And where if you're feeling behind the game and you haven't done any of this, it's okay. It's never too late to jump in and get customer obsessed.
Love that answer. So let's get into it. I want to hear, I think Trend Kite is next. I want to hear obviously where that came from, but how did you make that pivot to handing sales off to somebody else? Right. I mean, I think that's a huge thing. I mean, I'm going through it now. I mean, we have a much smaller company than you did at the end of that and that you have now, but it's a big shift for us. And I'm curious how you made that and how you finally pulled the trigger. And like, I'm not going to be the sales guy. I can't scale myself infinitely. I need to hire one person and then a team and then et cetera. So tell me about Trendkite. What was it? Where did it come from? And then let's go from there.
Yeah. Well, first off, I will say that I actually was the sales leader all the way through, right up until almost our sell. So I had a bigger team that hired underneath me, and I'll talk about that. But I definitely earned my keep by being that VP of sales, never having that title, but running all of growth throughout the entire tenure of my time at QuotaPath or at Trendkite. I've always been afraid to say where I would say Trendkite instead of QuotaPath. Now I just did the opposite. That's hilarious. That's great. That happened. My
Finally
time
made
at
the
Trendkite.
switch.
So as far as the idea, that really stemmed from my experience at Meltwater, the company I was at previously. I was a sales leader on the West Coast, kind of like a little tired of what I was doing, but I had a boss that didn't work super well with, but he did do something that was fundamentally impactful, almost more than any other person has done for me in my entire life. And that was he took us to go see Tony Robbins, took us as in leaders. And I didn't know who Tony Robbins was. I knew like the movie Shallow Hal. I don't know if you've seen that movie with Jack Black
What a
and Gwyneth
what
Paltrow.
a reference to Tony Robbins. Yes.
So that was the only Tony Robbins reference that I could have
Okay.
named at the time.
Highlight that.
Maybe I could have done the commercials, like the telecommercials
Right.
that he did for his like financial freedom or whatever. But we went to this event, UPW, Unleash the Power Within, and I went in with like, all right, if I'm gonna go, I'll at least like like I'll say that I'm going and actually embrace it as much as I possibly can. So this 4-day event, 12 to 15-hour days. You're just on the whole time. And Tony himself is on. He's a huge presence, like 6'7", and the guy has a huge presence. If you haven't seen him speak live, it is a sight to behold. But it really was the right time. I needed to hear the things that he said, things about limiting beliefs that, oh, you want to go start your own company, you don't, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough education, whatever it is that's holding you back. You want to own an airplane. How are you going to go do that? And I left there just having this like state change. That's literally what he calls it, having a change of state, where I took the tools and said, okay, I'm going to go just do this thing. And I did the thing that I shouldn't have done, but I did it anyway, which was I told everyone after leaving that I was going to go start a company. And they're like, what are you going to start? And it doesn't matter. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to own an airplane in 3 years. By the way, it's also one of the goals that I wrote down in a book that I still have and reference back to. And I left it and I was just so jazzed up. So when I thought about the things that I knew, well, I knew Meltwater, and the thing that was being asked and discussed by our customers was more of these reports, these BI reports that everyone else in the organization was doing all of these type of operational reports through the Domos of the world at that time. And this was like the first iteration of it. I think Kiss Metrics was like one of the first versions of this. Again, dating myself here a little bit. And so I was like, well, I can probably do something on the BI front. Marketing is having its renaissance here. PR could have the same, and PR attribution. So I found the first guy that was also obsessed with Tony Robbins, and I had worked with Matt Allison. So we became co-founders immediately. And I said, like, look, all these clients are asking me for this type of reporting. Let's go do it. So we basically faked it before we made it. We built these reports by hand of like, what journalists should you be talking to? It's actually kind of funny because Gen AI does a lot of this today. And my co-founder from Kite, I worked with at Meltwater, is now started a company, Handraise, that does it with Gen AI. So basically taking the reports that we were building by hand and now automating them fully. But we did that at a level with the metrics of like share of voice metrics and impressions and attribution. And the thing that we differentiated on is we were able to connect your website to all of your press coverage. So we could tell where all your traffic. So the Nikes, Hershey's of the world were like, oh, loving this because
Right.
they could be as PR leaders now have a seat at the table. So my first customer there was an organization called OpenStack Foundation. That was a $3,000 deal. I didn't even mention my Meltwater first deal. I was a 21-year-old kid, for sure, kid. And my like second cold call, I spoke to this woman, Lori Wentraub. Lori, if you're out there, thank you. She's my first customer. And funny enough, I still have a relationship with her. Every few years, I like will message her. So I messaged her right before this conversation. Junior Diabetes Research Institute of Miami University. And that was my first customer. It was $3,000. And she was awesome because she helped give me the confidence that I could do this as a first time seller. And then fast forward 6, 7 years to Kite, my first customer was another $3,000 contract. And that was Lauren Sell. That was the name of the contact, the VP of marketing. And she was just fantastic. It was great to go in person. She was based in Austin. We went through the reports and she loved it. And then that team and company grew from 0 to 25 million in 5-ish years, 4 or 5 years. A lot of ups and downs through that time, but it was an awesome experience leading and building that team.
I had the guy Did you guys do the fire walk or the coal walk?
No, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't burn my feet for
So
sure.
I met the guy who ran those. He was on our podcast. He was the guy who, like,
Oh, well,
orchestrated,
if you
he has his own show. He has his own company now that just does fire walks.
you should introduce us because if he did this, he would remember the UPW I was at. It was San Jose in 2012 because it made the press because a ton of people got their feet burned. I was not one of them because I
I
followed
will thank you.
directions.
Yes. I know Dave, I think is his name, and you may have been one of the scared folks that he was talking about having the course, one of the
Oh,
coal
no,
walks.
I was, like,
You were running
running
it,
on that.
running
I
out there.
was stoked to do it. I got
Really?
so excited about it, like, day 1. I was all in from the moment Tony started speaking on that first day.
I love that. So very and you seem like that kinda guy. You seem like you just dive in head first.
I'm an all or nothing, like, as my wife says, like, oh, she'll roll her eyes
Right.
at me because I'm very much an all or nothing guy.
Well, I think that's like a very common characteristic, right? I mean, you don't go very far in business by like dipping your toe in and like doing it halfway. So,
Yeah.
well, let's go to QuotaPath, my friend. I want to talk a little bit about the exit of Trend Kite, but I mean, I know you had a nice sale there. You started QuotaPath. Like, what was that end of the journey like at Trend Path leading into QuotaPath?
Trend path.
I mean, Trend I just
You
did
just
both of them
created a new
together, Trend Kite into QuotaPath. Man, it's I don't know if I think they're just great names. I like both of them. I put them
there's a Trend K was always the tougher one because that K in there was a little harder for folks. 2018, we had moved back to Philadelphia from Austin. My wife had gotten tired of the heat. We had planned on moving back day 1. She actually promised that we'd move back in 2 years, and 5 years later, she was like, "Hey, AJ, you can whatever, you stay down here in startup land and do your little fun thing, but I'm going back." So she went back and I was commuting every week for 8 months. And then we got an LOI from Cision PR Newswire in 2018. And that was a good opportunity to exit. Stage left. And I had already really started QuotaPath, honestly, at that point in time, based off of the challenges of compensation. So we're a sales compensation management platform, but we help thousands of companies, SMBs and mid markets, companies even like Masterclass or SeatGeek, Recorded Future, and we help them with their sales comp management and understanding what their sales comp should look like. But we also do the actual commission tracking for the reps to have visibility into this, and then all the way to the payouts side of the process. And we have some exciting announcements there. So I jumped in pretty quickly. I've raised funds. I've actually done 10 fundraising rounds in 10 years over that time. I haven't raised in 2 years and I don't plan on raising anytime soon, but I had gone through a lot of fundraising and a lot of different variations of it, which they themselves, as you know, Jay, that's its own type of sell
Mhm.
that takes a special skill set and is nuanced. And every single round I've done has been a little bit different. I actually wasn't planning on doing a venture institutional round in my pre-seed or seed for that matter. And in 2018, I got a call on my cell phone as I was working on this from a VC, Chris Schonk, his partner at ATX Venture Partners. And he said, AJ, I've heard so much about you in Austin. Like, I know you're working on something new. It's in go to market. We had a company that exited too early, in my opinion, in this and space. And I like want to go all in, like, and do this with you. I'm like, Chris, this is the first time we're talking. I don't know you. Like, said, come by the office. I'll chat with you. We had a great conversation. And 2 hours later, he's like, I'm going to send you a term sheet tomorrow morning. I'm like, heard that story before. Sure. And no, he did. He sent me a term sheet. Actually, I think it was that night he sent me a term sheet. It was just we were just so excited and away we went. And in 2018, I think the world was very different. It was still very much inside sales teams. Teams were still working through the phones. It wasn't as much boiler room, I would say. I think marketing helped
Mhm.
finding the right buyer and your ideal customer profile and product market fit. All those things were top of mind for founders. So it wasn't just about building the best sales team because you cared about the customer on the retention and the renewal front. And that was something that I thought a lot about with QuotaPath. But we wanted to build a bottom up approach. So we start with the sales rep and then move our way up. And that's changed. I mean, it's changed a lot, our buyers, RevOps, and finance, but we've built an end-to-end platform and it's been awesome. And I think we were talking about before this, Jay, and I honestly couldn't remember my first customer. And we say customer here. That is one thing that I will actually call out. There's a difference between client and customer. And at Trendkite, I probably didn't care. I was a client or customer or whatever. At QuotaPath, I care
Mhm.
a lot about that word. Customer is someone from a platform that uses your tool. Over client, there's like a whole level of services, just different expectations around it, versus I wanted to build something that was scalable that anyone could come and see themselves using in some way without feeling like you have to have human interaction.
That's a quote or an idea from Built to Sell, I think. I remember that from I reread that recently, and it got me thinking about hiring 2 salespeople instead of 1, but I love that distinction. It is very important.
I will call out, if you're ever hiring sales teams, always hire, this is a practical piece of advice, always hire them in groups of at least 2, 100%. That's still something that I
Is it still
subscribe to.
relevant? I mean, even in
Yeah, for
today and,
sure.
like, remote world and, like, all
Yep.
this stuff, you still think that's
I
the
mean,
way to
maybe
go?
there's an enterprise seller with specialty that's a little bit different, that I think that's different, but if you're in more of a transactional, even with remote work or mid-market, I am still very much on the, like, you want to hire 2 people that, like, I've seen this over and over again with companies that I advise or friends' companies. Doesn't matter. It's one data point that I could point to and say, look, I know it anecdotally, this is definitely true, but I've looked at it and researched it. I believe it still holds true today. And I can have the debate with any of you out there that disagree with me on that.
It makes sense. I don't have an opinion on it yet. Like I said, we're still working on our first, so I think that's a fair I mean, considering you created and run so many sales teams, I'll take your word for it.
I'm still learning and growing. If someone out there is like wants to hard disagree with me on this, please reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's easy.
It
And
is
I
very
will.
easy to find you. You are all over the place. You're on all sorts of podcasts and you have your own. And, I even found you at dinner, which was I did not expect to see you walking in, which is a great surprise for me. I was very happy to see you. Any advice for somebody who's starting a product company in 2024?
Boy, well, this is a conversation I had on a recent episode of Top Line. I would not actually start a software company today, like right now, in this moment.
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of eagerness around what AI is going to become. I just don't think the early adopters as founders are ultimately going to be the winners, unless you're in that like core infrastructure in the like certainly OpenAI and Microsoft era, but even like the core weaves of the world, NVIDIA. I think that there's a lot, they're all doing really well and we're really early. But if you're building software on top of any of these, you really have to understand your use case. And something that Mark Roberge, a partner at Stage Two, said really recently is that he's talked to a lot of founders recently, and there's not enough founders that are really thinking about customer problems solved in the future. There's not enough future scaping of this. Someone like Mike Maples Jr., Floodgate partner, also first investor in like every Valley company out there. He has said this where he looks for that greatness. Starting Greatness is the name of his podcast. And he looks for that greatness and that mental model of who's out there and thinking in this way. Peter Thiel talks about this in the Contrarian point of view, Josh Koppelman here in Philadelphia. And I think that's something that I'm not seeing enough of either. Mark said that, but I agree with that.
Hmm.
So the other side of it is that each of these departments, marketing, totally changing, sales, changing. And that's just really challenging to work with. When you already have an unknowns in startup world, you want to control and de-risk as much of it as you possibly can. And I think there's just too much out there to de-risk that makes it fraught with execution risk across the board. So I will say that however, and I'm going to bring it back to where we started this conversation in like the wellness, health
Mhm.
aspect of it. There is so much opportunity in today. There's never been more opportunity to disrupt than there ever has been. So I'm saying don't start it today because I think you'll go through a lot of headache and challenges. And sure, you'll learn. I think you'll just learn a lot faster if closer to the end of this year, beginning of next year to start a company. And I say that because I have all the time in the world to evaluate what's going on.
You have a little bit of a different vantage point, I think, now to wait, but I mean, I think it's great advice, and it's very choppy. That's what it feels like. It feels just very choppy,
Founders have
and
been, I mean, we've gone, Jay, you know this, like this startup, the ups and downs and roller coasters I've gone through QuotaPath versus Trendkite is just night and day. I mean, I have some stories, certainly from Trendkite. I have lots of stories where 2 weeks were running out of money at one point, and we had 20 people on the payroll. Like it was a pretty big deal and had to find the funds. I've had those stories. QuotaPath and like just the amount of challenges with the pandemic, with remote work, with interest rates, with buyer behavior, with marketing, with venture funding, with AI, like a lot of those things have just like will just hit you and you're just like you take them and you're like, okay, we're gonna move on. But if you're a founder and you're like coming into this and you don't have that armor plated, it's nothing against you. If you're like gung ho on starting, I'm not gonna stop anyone from starting their own company, certainly not me. I'm just saying from my vantage point, I don't believe that today is the best time to start a company, but I do believe that will change by the end of the year.
Fair enough. All right. I do want to hit on health because you have probably one of the most intense health regimens that I've heard of recently. Definitely a throwback to, just like I think I mentioned Jack Dorsey in our conversation, and then the cold plunge thing. First of all, and I told this to my wife the other day too. I said, "Do you know how AJ found out about some of his health stuff?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Who's AJ?" And I was like, "The guy I've been raving about for the past week and a half since dinner." I said, "His Apple Watch." And she's, then she was hooked and she wanted to know all
Yeah.
about it. And I told her the whole thing. So give me the Cliff Notes version. How, what happened? What changes did you make? And kind of where are you at today?
Yeah, I mean, health is one of those things that this is an all or nothing thing in conversation. And today I'm in a great spot, but I just to set the stage. I've always had this relationship. We all have relationships with health. My relationship was started when I was 8 years old, and I found out that I thought I had a heart murmur, but it was actually, I only have one working lung. I have two lungs, but only one works. And so I'm a runner and I ran cross country. It never stopped me from anything. Obviously, I fly planes, but it's always like I see a cardiologist every other year. It was every 6 months at that time just to make sure there weren't any issues and with my heart. And when you found a company that the amount of stress that it hits all of us in different ways. So I've had multiple trips to the ER over the years. I've never had a panic attack, interestingly enough. My first one was stress with a ulcer and taking an antibiotic that my body reacted very poorly to, and I thought I had rheumatoid arthritis, which actually had reactive arthritis. So I would wake up every morning with a different sore, not just soreness, but just like pain where I couldn't think about anything but the pain, and then hives all over my body. And that happened for 6 weeks. Then most recently, last summer, I was at Shore House with my kids and I was working and I met them for dinner. I sat down and like I told to you, Jay, and the other CEOs, I just didn't feel right. My heart felt like it was literally going to pound out of my chest. It did feel like a little bit of a panic attack at that time. And my watch went off for atrial fibrillation for AFib. It was 150 beats per minute. I had to go to the hospital. I went to the ER because my condition. And yeah, I was there for a few days and it was not fun. And like, okay, well, we're going to shock you back into rhythm at this point or give you beta blockers, do all of these things. And ultimately, like, left there with, holy cow, this is not good. So it's been a long journey since then. I didn't make a million different changes overnight. I've added
Mhm.
things along the way. Ice plunge is one of those. I do 12-minute meditation a day in 42-degree weather. I just did a 10-mile run on Saturday, but I do work out. I do a Peloton hit with my wife in the morning or strength training. And then I will do a run in the afternoon. So, like right after this, I'm going to go for a nice 30-minute run, just a short run. It'll be a 3-mile run. And eating, I also intermittent fast, which I've done intermittent fasting over the years as well. And yeah, there's a lot of people like Peter T that I've listened to that kind of talk about some of the benefits of some of these things. It's not for everyone. Ultimately, the big change to me was confidence. And confidence has changed a lot of things. It's changed my outlook that, exercise has led to energy. Energy has led to sleeping well, has led to more present in conversations and more
Mhm.
proactive. That aside, I have a phenomenal management team and I'm very lucky and blessed with my management team to be able to go out and do all these things that we're doing and I'm doing and, still find time to hang out with the family.
I love it. I love it very much. And we'll have to add each other on Peloton because I'm a Peloton junkie
What's my
slash
wife's
strength.
Peloton account? She's coming up on 1,000. So I
Is
got like,
she?
we're going to do a live event. We got a
I
picture.
try to, man, everybody does it. And then you go on there and then like, it doesn't, they don't say anything. You're like, "God I mean, come on, Ben. You know, Ben's my guy. Ben Aldis. He's
Ben,
my
Ben, yeah, Ben,
Ben's
he's
my
British,
favorite.
right? Ben
Yes,
British?
yes, Ben's British.
Is
He's
that
like,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually on my list. I want to go to the
What's it
studio and
crazy? It's
I with
awesome
Ben.
stuff. Awesome stuff, guys.
It's, yeah, and belters and bangers. He always has belters and bangers that are playing. So he's a lot of fun. All right, last question for the man who's done lots of awesome things in his life. If you do anything on Earth and you knew you couldn't fail,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I heard this. You said on Earth, but I'm gonna cheat on this.
Mhm. I
Can
like
I
where this
cheat?
is going. I like where this is going. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I've recently, like, almost finished Three Body Problem, which is a series, and it just will take you to a whole different world. But, like, I was an astronomy major in college for half of my I'm not I wasn't I didn't finish my degree there. Got to the math, it was a little too difficult. I just love space. I went to space camp when I was a kid and science. So the idea of colonizing another planet. So I'll say the moon for now. I'm gonna colonize the moon because everyone colonize Mars.
Right.
But yeah, what's the show that's on Apple TV that is also awesome that talks about colonizing? It says
Uh,
if Russia had won the space race, it's 4 seasons, it's
okay.
fantastic.
Okay.
But anyway,
Check it out. Yeah.
I would, colonize the moon.
Love
That's
it.
my
And nobody's ever said colonize the moon, so that's a great one. I knew we had some connection beyond all this other stuff. We just love space. Yeah.
love space, love
Love it
space.
so much. We have a I create
Talk K-stars all day long.
oh, it's just, you know, it's a very and astrophotography is like such a like an
That
old
I have to get it because I'm getting more into it, as you can see with the setup of the studio. I'm getting
yeah.
more into film on the other side of it, and I need to
Well,
do
I
that.
have yeah, there's a 115 millimeter telescope on my table behind me. So if you ever want to learn more about it, feel free. We'll chase some stars together. AJ, just a pleasure, my friend. By far one of the coolest, most accomplished. Just you know, and I don't look. I'm gusher like fanboy over many people that I have on the show, but you are like just a level above, and I can't thank you enough for your time today. If people want to reach out to you directly, how do they do that?
I mean, I still my LinkedIn inbox has gotten tough, so I'm actually gonna switch over. If you wanna email me, aj@quotapath.com, reference this episode, and I promise you I'll respond. I had a couple questions in there, so if you reference those, you get bonus
Put
points
the
for that.
points in there. All right, and I'm going to connect you with the Firewalker guy after
But
this. And
done. Matt, you said his name was?
Dave, I think.
Dave. Dave, okay.
We'll get you guys connected. All right. Well, AJ, you're the best, man. People check out QuotaPath, check out AJ, send him an email, and enjoy your run this afternoon. All right, buddy. Thanks for being on.
Alright. Thanks, Jay.
See you, brother.